Good afternoon. My name is Susannah Heschel, and I am the Eli Black Professor of Jewish Studies here at Dartmouth College, where I teach courses in Jewish history, especially modern Jewish history, and I teach the history of Zionism, of course, as part of those classes. And I talk also about the state of Israel, its history, its politics, and its culture. And it's wonderful to be with you today. I come from a very rich and illustrious Jewish family. My father was a Jewish theologian, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary, but was born and educated in Warsaw in a Hasidic family. In fact, he used to say that he grew up surrounded by people of religious nobility, which is an extraordinary phrase. His father and his grandparents, going back many generations, were all Hasidic rabbis. These were people who strove their whole lives to cultivate their spiritual life, to cultivate their ability to pray. My father left Warsaw and went to study when he was 20 years old at the University of Berlin. He went to Berlin because he said at the time it felt like the center of the intellectual universe, the lectures, the scholarship, the concerts, the theater. He studied at the university where he wrote a PhD dissertation on prophetic consciousness. That is, what is it to be a prophet? What did the prophets experience? He finished the dissertation in December of 1932, so just weeks before Hitler came to power, and then it took another almost 3 years before he actually received the PhD, because in those days, in order to get a PhD, you had to publish the dissertation, and he couldn't get a book published by a Jew in Nazi Germany, of course. My father came to this country in March of 1940 as a brand plucked from the fires of Europe, he used to say, quoting the prophet Zechariah. Came to this country, but he lost his mother, 3 of his sisters, his whole extended family, the whole world that he grew up in and that nourished him. Growing up with my father, what I experienced was an extraordinary love of Judaism. You know, there are some people who like to say so-and-so is strictly observant or strictly orthodox, and I would say my father was lovingly observant. Everything he did Jewishly was filled with love and devotion. And that included, of course, his feelings about the state of Israel, which came to him like a miracle in his life, and for so many others as well. What he conveyed to me about Israel was something emotional, not political arguments, but something much deeper, because Israel for my father was part of his religious life, and he felt it was for all of us as Jews and as Christians. When I was growing up in New York, I went to a school called Ramaz. It was an Orthodox day school, and all the children that I went to school with were, I think all of them, children of European refugees, people who had escaped or who had survived, who had lost family. My classmates all had the names of dead relatives. It was an Orthodox school, and it was intensely Zionist, lovingly Zionist. We sang Hebrew songs, Zionist songs. We dreamed about Israel. We learned about Israel. It was part of our lives. It felt like it was next door. There was an intensity to that Jewish life when I was growing up. And when I was a child, although my parents didn't have much money, we went to Israel several times as a family. When we went to Israel, it was extraordinary for all of us. First, the sense of the miraculous, just to have a place of safety, of refuge, but the idea that we had a state made by Jews, that was amazing. In those days, the very idea of a Jewish fireman, a Jewish policeman, it was amazing. It was extraordinary. And in those days, I just want you to know, I remember going to the store with my mother and buying some food. No one had a bag. There were no plastic bags. There were no satchels. The grocery store didn't give you a bag. It took what you bought and wrapped it in a piece of old newspaper, and that's how you carried your food home. But what was thrilling, what was truly thrilling, was simply to walk on the same streets that King David had walked. that idea of being alive, it felt alive with the Bible. I felt somehow I was living in biblical times, living that history, that somehow right around the corner, there were the prophets, there were the kings, right there. I looked at the Judean desert, the mountains, the hills outside Jerusalem, and I realized the same hills had been there for so long, since Bible times. So it was an enthusiastic time. And also, on one of our trips, my father was the official guest of the president of Israel, Zalman Shazar, who was a childhood friend of my father's from Warsaw. And President Shazar asked my father to come to Israel for 2 months and give lectures all over the country to different Jewish groups, because Israelis, he felt, had lost a sense of Jewish identity. My father worried about that too. He used to say Israel was a miracle, but that Israel also needed something from us as American Jews, needed something from American rabbis to re-infuse them with the spirit of Jewishness, because being in Israel doesn't mean you give up your Judaism. On the contrary, you fulfill it. And so we went all over Israel and listened to my father give these talks about the importance not only of being in Israel, but remembering that Israel is a culmination of a hope that Jews have kept alive for such a long time.